966.
This is the 966 episode 47. Richard, happy early Father's Day to you, my man, my boy.
Boy, thank you. Same to you.
Thank you.
Same to you. That's so exciting. And Father's Day is big when you got youngins like that. Now it's like whatever. And also Father's Day this year is on the birthday of my youngest. So we'll see
who really gets the attention.
Yeah. I don't think it's in doubt.
Rain check on Father's Day at the Wilson household.
Whatever. Nice thing is at this point, both Jane and I, it's like I got my gift. So I told her I got my gift for Father's Day. Like she told me for Mother's Day, I got my gift for Mother's Day. Don't worry about it. I'll expect a card and stuff from the kids, but don't worry about a gift from me because I got it.
Really just anything. And that's a good time to use the line, "You are my gift" for Father's Day. So that will get you a lot of, that'll get you a lot of capital at home. We are both #girl dads, Richard, and love it very much. So again, congrats to you. We are recording this episode a day earlier than we usually do. Richard, we have a full day meeting tomorrow in DC. So if we appear to miss some breaking news this week, that's the reason. I doubt it'll happen, but who knows? We also will not have a special guest this week as we were unable to make a scheduling work with some delayed flights and a bunch of other things in the air. It's never easy. But Richard, you are a magician. You've already rescheduled it. So we'll be back with a guest next week. And again, remember to subscribe to this wherever you're getting your podcasts and give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts especially will help us out a lot. Okay, Richard, let's get going. 5 stars. What's your one big thing this week?
Well, what's that showbiz adage, never let them see you sweat?
That's right. Am I sweating already?
all the dancing behind the scenes in terms of booking and scheduling and production is a full-time thing. When we already had our full-time thing.
The making of the lamb sausage, indeed.
Yeah. My one big thing, this month, the Ministry of Investment, MISA, published its investment highlights for Q1 2022. It's actually a good read. It's well organized, attractive, loaded with data points, but mostly it's 56 pages of triumph. I mean, this first quarter for Saudi Arabia was pretty spectacular. It reminds me, Lucien, of the publications, like I have when the Nats, Washington Nationals, won the 2019 World Series, they put out a publication, which is a recap of the season, and it's glowing and it's positive and it's celebratory and everything. So this reminds me of one of those recap of a champion season, which would be in that first quarter, 2022 for Saudi Arabia.
It's rare for a publication to have a soundtrack with it, and it's "We Are the Champions" by Queen. Just auto plays when you open the publication up. So, the headline. There are a couple of headlines, and I'll get into the meat of it because again, it's an interesting read. It's like I said, 56 pages. It's actually easily accessed. Ministry of Investment wanted you to know in Q 2022 that they saw 101 investment deals worth more than $4 billion. Deals announced are expected to create more than 5,800 new jobs. Now we know, and we've covered it, and we'll cover it again. A big chunk of that was a $3.4 billion investment that was committed by Lucien Motors to build an electric vehicle factory in Saudi Arabia. The report also wanted you to know, going back to 2021, that the FDI inflow for 2021 was $19.3 billion, the highest in 10 years. Now, we also know that $12.4 billion of that was from the sale of Saudi Aramco pipelines. But even without that, the inflows would have been at their highest level since 2016. And the ministry reported that 3,300 new foreign investment licenses in the second half of 2021, greater than threefold increase from the same period in 2020. So, as we know, the Saudi economy is just busting along. One of the interesting things about the report is they have a number of interviews with prominent leaders from the private sector. So you get, you get extended interview with head of Amazon Middle East, CEO of Lucid, Peter Rawlinson, head of CEO of Roshan, vice chairman, CEO of Aqua Power. Also an interesting one with Majid Al-Hokhil, which is Minister of Municipal Rural Affairs and Housing, but it's on real estate.
I say that because we've got an interesting episode upcoming with Faisal Durrani with Knight Frank, who's going to tell us all about commercial and residential real estate in Saudi Arabia. Saudi economic performance, Q1, Q2. So it goes on. I'm gonna do some highlights just because there's a lot of data points in here, and I'll just run through them. So 24.8% year-on-year rise in March's industrial production index. 22% year-on-year expansion of manufacturing activity, 26.6% year-on-year gain from mining and quarrying, 9,383 new licenses issued in Q1 2022, a 350% quarterly increase in licenses, 19 times greater compared to Q1 2021. 299 factories started in production in Q1 2022. And on and on. Like I said, it's a triumphant recap of an amazing first quarter. Of interest is there's other sections like that has a bit, and by the way, it's nicely displayed, infographics, everything. Home to the world's largest projects, or real estate investment funds listed on the Tadawul. And you'll like this. And I thought it was kind of funny. It was like our top three selections among the latest Invest Saudi opportunities. And so I listed three of them. One was zoo development, which I guess is a big part of Saudi Arabia's expanding quality of life initiative. Development of a bonded zone in Dammam, a big opportunity to transport logistics. And this is just for you, Lucien, the Hanagia project.
Hanagia,
which is the major mine initiative that's underway. Anyway, I recommend it. It's a good read, and as I said, there's never going to be this was the first in terms of growth of GDP, is the best quarter since 2011, and we went over this last week. That 2011 was sort of an outlier rather in terms of actual economic growth. So Saudi Arabia, good quarter. And the Ministry of Investment is here to tell you about it with a really interesting report. Investment highlights for Q1 2022.
Quite the quarter from Saudi Arabia. Richard, you and I have both talked about this off the air, but the Invest Saudi team and the reinvigorated, re-energized team behind getting and attracting investment into Saudi Arabia is impressive, and they're doing really good work. And it's stuff like this. I mean, this report, I don't have much to add in this situation because the report is so in depth and so well done that, it's the type of thing that they can market and say, hey, look, like here's just all the facts about what's going on, done in a very beautiful way. It does have that sheen of the consultant vibe to it, where it just is ultra professional and beautiful. But check this report out because this is really good. There is a lot of new data in here too. I mean, they talk about how well the economy is doing, and they talk about flash estimates and stuff, which actually were beaten this first quarter, I think, since the publication of this at 9.9%. But just really, really good GDP growth, that is. Just really, really good stuff in this report. Worth checking out, especially if you're thinking about doing business in Saudi Arabia, if you're looking to contribute to opening a zoo in Saudi Arabia, if that's your sector. They talk about that a little bit.
Or mining, Hanagia.
Or mining, the largest mine potentially in Saudi Arabia. So yeah, there are a lot of opportunities. And Richard, this is all about Vision 2030, attracting foreign direct investment, something they really want. And now they're really stepping on the accelerator saying, hey, we're doing very well. Now's the time to get in. This is still at the ground floor of everything that's changing with Vision 2030. So jump in now. And this report really puts that on display.
I should add, this was published in June, early June, so before that 9.9% growth, but it predicted 9.6. Also, they have a section on some of the new laws, the investment law and the personal data law. So it's got a bit of everything. It's an interesting read.
We will have this report on our website, sustg.com. We'll also have it on the 966podcast.com. If you want to go directly to it, it's investsaudi.sa and just go to the media center. It's there to download, and they have a nice summary of it. Just if you're doing business in Saudi Arabia or want to, check this thing out. I mean, this is a monster, and it's really good. Richard, my one big thing, President Biden's visit to Saudi Arabia is locked in and has been confirmed by both the White House and Saudi Arabia. First, let's get to the facts on the visit here. The official visit to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will take place from July 15th through 16th. President Biden will be visiting Jeddah after first stopping in Israel. President Biden will attend a meeting of 9 GCC leaders there. And Jeddah is the current chair of the GCC, so that end of it makes sense. Now on to some interesting between the lines stuff on this. Firstly, comparing the two announcements or statements from the US and Saudi side. The White House statement noted that the visit is, quote, at the invitation of King Salman, and that President Biden, quote, appreciates King Salman's leadership and his invitation. He looks forward to this important visit with Saudi Arabia, which has been a strategic partner of the United States for nearly 8 decades. It does not directly mention Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The Saudi press agency, however, does confirm that President Biden would meet directly with Crown Prince MBS, and that's been repeated by major media outlets as well, so it's going to happen. The SPA also highlights all the issues that President Biden and MBS will discuss. Quote, the Crown Prince and President Biden will hold official talks that will focus on various areas of bilateral cooperation and joint efforts to address regional and global challenges. And this begins a list: exploring cooperation on emerging tech, economic investment, space, renewable energy, cybersecurity, climate and environmental initiatives, food and energy security, and food and energy security is mentioned pretty low on this list, and expanding trade and commercial ties to enable both countries to confront mutual challenges and seize the opportunities of the 21st century. Richard, this is a very important visit by President Biden to Saudi Arabia. Let's talk a little bit about it.
I like how you did that. That was a nice wrap up, and I think that's a good take to sort of examine the different announcements, the tone and the tenor and the focus and details of the different announcements. Because, and I also think it's important to understand that, he's just not going to Saudi. He's doing, it's a bigger trip, but obviously the overwhelming media focus for this trip is on the handshake between President Joe Biden and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. But as you point out, Lucien, and President Biden is traveling first to Israel, then the West Bank, as the Biden administration is re-engaged with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas after he and the Palestinian National Authority had been mostly ignored by the Trump administration. He's scheduled to fly directly to Jeddah, which is something, and meet with all 6 of the GCC heads of state, plus representatives from Iraq, Jordan, Egypt, and probably Morocco. So this is, essentially all of our friendly Arab allies in one place in Jeddah, meeting with the President of the United States. This is a critical gathering, and it's an important opportunity for President Biden to reset and perhaps chart a new course for the U.S. relationship with the Gulf and our allies in the broader Middle East. And that is something, Lucien, that obviously we've talked about frequently on the 966, the need for a reset, recalibration, and update of the relationships. I suspect those meetings will include an airing of grievances on the part of our Gulf and Arab allies. And I think this is not only healthy, but essential to moving forward. It's kind of like therapy. These grievances have built up, and they're real and genuine from their point of view, and it's important to share it. The long shot possibility in the outside lane of results, and one that many pro-Israeli constituencies are advocating, is some move toward normalization with Israel. Perhaps even a proposed region-wide integrated air and missile defense umbrella that includes both Israel and Saudi Arabia. And I think we'll talk about that a little later, I think also in one of our 6 Yallah topics. My guess is that the win on that front, quote unquote normalization, will be an announcement of a U.S. brokered agreement between Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Israel on the Tiran and Sunavira Islands. Reportedly, this would result in expanded overflight routes over Saudi Arabia for flights originating in Israel. We've done a segment on this, talked about it. It's fascinating. It's underway, and hopefully it'll be successfully concluded. And if it is a win. As we talked about, better to be cooperating, better to be talking. It's a nice pretext for these people, these countries, to be in the room together and have a civil conversation and resolve the dispute. So that would be a win. Um, but let's talk about that handshake. As we know, it is a fraught subject in the U.S. Because of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, combined with Joe Biden's campaign trail pledge to make Saudi Arabia a, quote, pariah, unquote. As I have noted previously, my frame of reference on this is not the heinous and heartbreaking act itself or the parsing of what Mohammed bin Salman did or did not know. It's really my disagreement with what seems to be a Saudi exceptionalism when it comes to highly objectionable extrajudicial cross-border actions, which this obviously was. You know, the murder of Jamal Khashoggi was an illegal extrajudicial act. But when I say, Saudi exceptionalism, what I mean is, if this is a litmus test for not dealing with someone in Mohammed bin Salman's position, consistency demands that we reject any interaction or engagement with Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, Recep Erdogan, and Kim Jong-un, to name just four. And each of these, by the way, have met with the U.S. president within the last 4 years. And if we're going to be really thorough with the list, you can go much farther. And it would have to include Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. In the last 2 months alone, Israel has carried out a double-digit number of strikes throughout the Middle East. Not only on Israel's northern front, but according to foreign reports, also against targets in Iran and Iraq. 4 Iranians tied to the country's nuclear program or Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps have also died under mysterious circumstances, all in incidents blamed on Israel. And this is not a secret policy. Last week, Prime Minister Bennett specifically stated that, quote, the past year saw a turning point in Israel's strategy vis-a-vis Iran. In the past year, the state of Israel has taken action against the head of the terrorist octopus and not just against the arms as was done in previous decades. Now, unquote. This is not to, attack Israel. Even though these actions, are extrajudicial cross-border illegal attacks. And, there's many ways to justify it. There's many ways we've justified in the global war on terror, the preemptive attacks. But we are not going to shun Israel, and nor should we. But we have seen tons of ink spilled on this Biden visit to the region already, and it's a month away, so a torrent more is still to come. And so my point is consistency and U.S. national interest. And in my view, in terms of a lot of this, the tons of ink and the articles that we see every day, Lucien, I thought Richard Haass, president of the Council on Foreign Relations, offered an excellent insight in an essay he wrote for The Strategist just this week, in which he states, quote, a successful foreign policy for a global power such as the U.S. cannot choose values over interests. A pure value-centered approach to Saudi Arabia or towards China, Russia, Iran, or North Korea, for that matter, is unsustainable. The principal measure of foreign policy is that it prioritizes the country's security over its preferences. Realism must prevail over idealism. History suggests that the ability of a country, even one as powerful as the U.S., to bring about political reform in other countries is limited, unquote. So I applaud President Biden's return to realism. And I sincerely hope his trip brings positive returns for the interests and the security of the United States.
Well said. The headline here is that President Biden is visiting Saudi Arabia and that it's taking place between June 15th and 16th. And he's meeting with a bunch of GCC leaders. He will meet with King Salman. He will meet with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. That's the headline of a very long, complicated, thrilling, feature-length story, and it's a very complex relationship with a long history. And I think really you can say 4 things about the visit, and all of them are true, and people disagree on what matters more than the other. The first is that the murder of Jamal Khashoggi was a heinous act, was a terrible crime. thoughts with his family and friends and anyone who knew him. It's terrible, and it should never have happened, period. Second, that is the number one issue affecting U.S.-Saudi relations now, and it was the day it happened, and has been consistent in that since that happened. And I don't know anybody that would deny this. And in fact, in a recent Politico piece, which we'll get to in a little bit here, Richard, Mohammed bin Salman said it as well. He denied having anything to do with it, but he said, I know that this is dramatically affecting our relationship, and I want to have a good relationship with the United States, and I want to fix this. I think 3 is that if you were to take a survey of the 966 podcast's 48 episodes and the 48 interviews that we've conducted, the U.S.-Saudi relationship, underneath the surface, the roots between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia are deep, and they're entangled together in a good way. And I think that's true in defense and security and military, in the economy, in energy and tech, sector to sector, B2B, G to G. It's really strong and deep and complex, and it's because it's been built up over 80 years. And I think the United States and Saudi Arabia would both greatly benefit by fostering and making those roots healthy again and working together. And I think 4, Richard, is that Saudi Arabia is going to choose its own destiny, and it already has with Vision 2030. It's a huge economic and social overhaul of the whole kingdom. And the pathway that they've chosen for their overhaul is one that I think benefits not just the United States, but our allies, the West, economically, in terms of security and defense, and I think culturally as well. And I think that the United States stands to benefit from engaging with Saudi Arabia versus shunning them. People can generally agree on all 4 of those things, and that's what makes this very complex. I think Biden, like you just said, Richard, he is going with a realist tack now. The world is different than it was when he assumed office. So, yeah, I think it's fair that we talk about all of those things, and that's what we do here. We're an open forum, and so I think this visit forces us to really make an assessment of this.
I like that. I think those are 4 good points, and only thing I would add is, my point of departure is the same as yours. When we talk, with Saudi U.S. Trade Group, the 966, the Sustic Review, all these things, very Saudi-centric, and we examined details of those aspects that you talked about, Lucien, the many, many sectors and many, many facets of the relationship. And very often as we're talking about Saudi, but the point of departure is, for me, is U.S. national interest. It's not Saudi interest.
Agreed.
Somewhere along the line, I concluded that, a good, healthy, well-maintained relationship with Saudi Arabia is important to U.S. national interests. And a lot of people agree with me, and it's been the case over the years. But, realism allows us to, as Richard Haas said, realism must prevail over idealism. I just find it fascinating in terms of idealism. We just spent, multiple $1 trillion worth in Afghanistan. Initially, we went in to capture and root out, capture Osama bin Laden, ideally, but root out Al Qaeda, and it was successful. But we spent 20 years there, in large part trying to build a democracy and trying to promote women's rights and these things that we believe deeply are important and are important to us. And we failed miserably. It's a lesson that we've had to learn over and over, but we seem to forget. And I only say that because, realism should have trumped idealism there. We can't remake Afghanistan in our mold. And Saudi Arabia, as you alluded to, Saudi Arabia is going to progress at its what it considers its authentic and sustainable pace, and in the manner in which it thinks is most authentic and sustainable. And I'd like to see us support that and endorse it, but it's going to be unsatisfying for us in many ways. Doesn't change the fact that the relationship is very important. And by the way, I think that's part of the therapy of what that Jeddah meeting is going to be. As I mentioned, there's going to be an opportunity to air grievances. And I'm sure from the Saudi perspective, one of those is going to be, and has been in the preliminary meetings, why are you not paying attention to the extraordinary reforms that we've undertaken already? Why do we get zero credit for any of this? Even, we fouled up horribly with Jamal Khashoggi. It was just a tremendous tragedy and misstep. But look at the whole. The direction we're headed, it can only be considered positive. And you have issues with us in terms of detentions and human rights and religious intolerance. All right, we understand that. We're trying to deal with these issues authentically and organically. But you can tell, if you just pay attention, that we are trying to deal with them and we are moving forward. And as I said, I assume that will be one of the messages. Come on, get up, get current on Saudi Arabia.
Richard, that was therapeutic in a way. I'm glad we talked about it, because this is the time to do it. The visit is confirmed, and so it was worth sort of taking a look at the state of the U.S.-Saudi relationship from sober eyes and
take a swing at it. And it's always a little unnerving because it's so fraught, and because the domestic politics drives foreign policy in the States, and there's some very high temperatures and very emotional and committed and passionate people about this and about 9/11 and other things. And their voices aren't invalid by any means. It's just a matter of where you set your priorities and what you think is in the best long-term interest of the U.S.
Couldn't agree more. Richard, let's put a bow on it with that. And I think we should pivot, a big bow, for Father's Day. And I think we should pivot to Yallah, if you're cool with that.
Yallah. Saudi in a minute.
Yallah.
All right. Number one, the official Saudi press agency reported on Sunday that the kingdom's Ministry of Human Resources and Social Development announced that it will issue a ban on working under the sun between noon and 3 p.m. from starting today, June 15th. The decision will go until September 15th to safeguard the health and safety of working during the hot summer months.
Richard, it's sunny out here now and it's 1 p.m. So I'm off for the next 2 hours. No, this is really good. This shows greater awareness for worker safety in Saudi Arabia, which I think is important. Temperatures can soar to 120 degrees Fahrenheit in Saudi Arabia in the summer, and actually beyond that. Some records are being set. The world's only getting hotter. Worker safety has been a concern in the GCC widely, especially in places like Qatar, as they build very quickly, especially in relation to the World Cup. And Saudi Arabia is racing to build right now. So it's good to see them put worker safety first. I think this is good.
Yeah, I put this in there just because an acknowledgement of reality in Saudi Arabia. This ban's been in place since 2011, and it followed other bans around the GCC and neighboring countries. And it's sort of a rite of passage. It's summer when the ban gets into place. And obviously, if you're a construction firm, which is impacts most, you have to plan around it. It's a significant logistical and operational challenge. If you're complaining about, if I'm complaining here about work starting, I think Fairfax County is you can't start construction work before 8. Someone starts early. I think in Riyadh and elsewhere in the kingdom, especially during the summer months, work has to start early because you have to be out of the sun. Because it's sweltering. And you look at it's 85, 95 and up, and it'll be 85, 90 in the middle of the night. So and obviously on the coast in Jeddah in particular, as they say, the wet bulb index is extraordinary. So it's dangerous physically to be out there because when you sweat, it doesn't cool you down.
Mm-hmm. We should do this as a public service bit, but violations of the decision can be reported through the Unified Customer Service number 19911 or through the ministry's application, which is available on smartphones. That's the Ministry of Labor. Good to see. Yeah, rite of passage. It's that time of year in Saudi Arabia where a lot of Saudis are seeking much cooler weather. So, good to see. Good one here. Yallah number 2, Richard. Saudi Arabia is gearing up to host its first ever European Film Festival organized by the delegation of the European Union in Riyadh and film distribution company Arabia Pictures Group. Set to take place at the Esplanade in Riyadh, the film festival will run from June 15th through June 22nd. and today, and will screen 14 European films from different countries, including Austria, Belgium, Cyprus, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Italy, Malta, Poland, Spain, and Sweden. Cool. No United States, but that's all right. I guess it's European Film Festival. So
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. So very cool. More progress in the entertainment sector for Saudi Arabia.
I wanted this in because it's fascinating. Saudi Arabia is trying to thread a needle here, where it's becoming more open and more receptive to arts and more accepting of different views. So, for example, there's nothing too inflammatory or too controversial. Although this film festival is going to include a 2020 documentary called "I Am Greta," following climate change activist Greta Thunberg. So obviously that will be critical in its own way of oil producers and fossil fuel consumption. So it's there, but so they're trying to access this. I also want to bring up something in Tom Friedman's piece today, and he was talking about the International Film Festival in Jeddah in December, and he was talking about a film called "You Resemble Me," which is about the Islamization and radicalization of a young French Moroccan woman who died in November 2015 terrorist attacks in Paris. And obviously this is a fraught topic too in Saudi Arabia, because they've been accused of supporting or somehow endorsing or creating an environment where radicalization of youth is overlooked. But the thing that's interesting and that Friedman points out is that this film, which was aired at the International Film Festival in Jeddah, was banned in Egypt. So these are things going on in this country when at the same time in the last year, Doctor Strange, The Eternals, West Side Story, and now Lightyear won't see screens in Saudi Arabia for depictions of relationships or lifestyles that aren't seen as acceptable in Saudi Arabia. It's not only Saudi Arabia, it's also other areas in the region. My point being is you've got to bring some nuance to this. Everyone's up in arms. Oh, you're not allowing these blockbuster films because of these reasons. And it's, and that's criticism that has credibility from the outside. From the inside, Saudi Arabia is trying to chart its own path, and it's trying to open, it's trying to get different views, but at its own pace, in its own manner. So it's just not just one thing.
Yeah, one thing at a time. I mean, these films being shown in Saudi Arabia, our European films, creates a bit of a bridge and a window into European culture and society in Saudi Arabia. I mean, I know Saudis are very well traveled, and to Europe, especially we were just talking about the heat in the summer, Saudis like to escape and travel around. I mean, they are well traveled, but not all Saudis are. And this is a good window into European society and life in Europe. But you don't just start by doing this and then have all very edgy, very offensive films. You slowly bring in films to Saudi Arabia. Don't forget that films were reintroduced in 2018, Richard, was it? So it's
2018, yeah.
4 years. Yeah. So give it a little time. Don't criticize what's obviously progress in the right direction, in my opinion. Right. So interesting.
Great. Number 3, the Jewish Insider reports that in its first legislative initiative since its founding early this year, the Abraham Accords Caucus, comprised of members of both the House and Senate, introduced legislation on Thursday to encourage the U.S. to pursue a joint missile defense architecture with Israel and the U.S.'s Arab allies and the partners in the Middle East, including Saudi Arabia and Iraq. The bipartisan, and the name of it is Deterring Enemy Forces and Enabling National Defenses Act, advances a priority of building an integrated air and missile defense capability among the U.S.'s regional partners and allies to ward off ongoing drone and missile attacks by Iran and its proxies.
Yeah, this is something about which most of our defense and security expert guests have talked about. Colonel Brad Gandy, who is head of USMIDM, Bilal Saab, Colonel David Desroches. An interesting development. I also thought, Richard, this was interesting, the bipartisan nature of this. It's not just hawkish senators here. I mean, Democrat Cory Booker from New Jersey is a sponsor. The The legislation would require the Secretary of Defense to, quote, seek to cooperate with allies and partners to identify an architecture and develop an acquisition approach to implement an integrated air and defense, missile defense capability. It would instruct the Secretary to consider establishing a joint fund among the U.S. and regional participants to support an integrated defense architecture. Kind of cool that this is coming from Congress, and this does build on the Abraham Accords. I mean, you know, as incomplete as they are without Saudi Arabia, of course, it's interesting.
All right. Can I go on a rant?
Oh my gosh. Yes. It's a podcast. You can do whatever you want. Please.
Again, I threw this in here because it bugs the heck out of me. And I'll tell you why. So this is an Abraham Accords caucus. By the way, the Abraham Accords I have no issue with. I think it's positive development in many ways. But this is the Abraham Accords caucus. It's just passed legislation, bipartisan legislation directing the Pentagon to look into U.S. Air defense, integrated air and missile defense capability with our partners in the region, and that's as it mentions, we're talking Israel, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Iraq, Bahrain, Jordan, Egypt, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, and other regional partners and allies to be included within this cooperative framework. And in April, the House passed a bill that requires the Department of State to take certain actions promoting the normalization of relations between Israel, Arab states, and other relevant countries and regions. So it goes into detail about what the State Department should be doing. So let's remember, these bipartisan members of this bipartisan committee, especially the Democratic ones, would be strongly urging President Joe Biden to not meet with MBS. Yet they put in legislation that says, let's move ahead and try and support and mandate the Pentagon and the State Department to push normalization and, in the case of the Pentagon, regional and joint missile defense architecture. That includes Israel. All right. Again, well, I have a number of questions. One is, would these congressmen support a joint missile defense architecture among the GCC states, which is something that the Pentagon has hoped for and pushed and recommended for decades? Or is this I think there's a lot of onboarding here with this, because what it would lead to inevitably is normalization of relations with Israel without Israel having to give up anything. If you were to do this, it's implicit or explicit normalization with Israel in return for their defense capabilities, in essence. No discussion of this outstanding Palestinian issue and occupation. And so as I go back, we talk about, I mentioned it earlier, the inconsistency, the logical inconsistency, the double standards. The same people are saying, no, you should not go meet with MBS, are saying, no, I'm mandating you, the Pentagon, that you should push for a joint air and missile defense that includes Israel and Saudi Arabia. I'm mandating the State Department that you should push for normalization between Israel and Arab states, including Saudi Arabia. The inconsistency, left hand not really being consistent with the right hand, it's troubling to me. And this is not to say that the goal is not has no merit. It does. In a perfect world, Iran wouldn't be so obstreperous and troublesome. But in a perfect world, there'll be a defense mechanism, a regional defense mechanism between Israel and its neighbors that would work and everything. But there's reasons why these countries don't have diplomatic relations with Israel. It's because of their behavior towards the Palestinians for decades. And do we just move to the next step without any kind of recognition or concessions or any kind of movement from Israel on that issue.
So what's next here? The Defense Department's going to create this report or look into this. Then what?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's mostly posturing. It's mostly, and I'm sure the Pentagon is saying, "Well, yeah, we love that, but I'm not sure what we're supposed to do that." And these kinds of bills, it goes to the Department of State. And so, for example, the State Department in this directive, the State Department must also report on the status of normalization with relations with Israel, including information on one, laws that punish individuals for people-to-people relations with Israelis. And two, evidence of steps taken by Arab governments toward permitting or encouraging normalized relations between their citizens or residents and Israeli citizens. Now, I mean, does the State Department need that on top of everything else it's doing?
It does not. Going out on a limb.
But again, this is like returning to our one big thing in the discussion is, so much of what happens is driven by domestic politics. Our foreign policy in the U.S. has become tied inextricably to domestic politics, and you just have to hope you can sort it out and get a good result. But again, I don't, in and of itself, I don't have any problems with it. I just think the motivation is skewed. I think the motivation is to get Israel, relations with Israel and with Saudi Arabia in particular normalized. And that's the motivating thing behind here. And it doesn't, again, as I said, by the same people who don't want Biden to meet with MBS, some of the same people. But, without any recognition that maybe there's an unresolved issue in occupied territories.
Yallah number 4, King Salman Humanitarian Aid and Relief Center, KS Relief, announced Sunday that Saudi Arabia will provide $10 million to contribute to addressing the existing threats arising from the oil tanker Safar, which is anchored off the Red Sea coast north of the Yemeni port city of Al Hodeidah. The Safar tanker contains more than 1 million barrels of oil and has not been maintained since 2015, and any leakage would threaten regional marine life, fisheries, and biodiversity. If this thing blows, Richard, this would be catastrophic, and damage from it may run into the hundreds of billions of dollars, I think one estimate put, or
20 billion.
20 billion, sorry, so I was a little high, but
yeah.
Yeah, and my daughter is also upset about it, if anybody can hear in the background. Sorry about that.
Coco knows what she's talking about.
Are you talking about the tanker, Daddy?
She can speak already.
That's all she can say, just that one sentence.
So this is the FSO Safar, but SAFER, carrying a 1.1 million barrels of oil. Is moored 6 miles off the coast of Hodeidah, and it's 45 years old. It was put in place it's moored off the coast in 88, and it's connected to a pipeline from Marib, which is their oil producing region. And it once was a hub for storage and export of crude oil, but since 2015, the onset of the war in Yemen, the Houthis have not blockaded any efforts to inspect it or maintain it. So it's declining, it's decrepit, it's being manned by, I guess, less than 10 Yemenis trying to keep it from just falling apart. And as we said, 20 billion, and it holds four times more oil than the Exxon Valdez. So it would be catastrophic, as you said. And what's interesting is, so Saudi Arabia there was a pledge drive last month that raised 33 million. They need 80 million in order to get it started. 33 million was raised. Saudis just added 10. U.S. has added 10. They're about 20 billion short to get to that 80 million. And the U.S. the UN has started a crowdfunding operation. Actually, they're trying to close that
Kickstarter.
For a tanker off the Yemeni coast. Yeah, probably, as valid a Kickstarter as there's been out there, because the consequences would be disastrous. And certainly when you talk about $80 million in lieu of 20 billion cleanup and a devastation of all sorts of industries and livelihoods. So hopefully this happens and it can get remediated.
So my question is, and this is going to be the stupid question of the hour, maybe of the whole episode, probably of the whole episode. I got on a limb and say that. So it's the tanker has what, 1 million barrels of oil in it?
1.1 million. Yeah.
Okay. And so if it's $100 a barrel, couldn't you take the oil out and sell it? I'm sure the oil, I don't know, has it gone bad? Is it, does it, I don't know, but
good question.
It seems like maybe, that could be something. I don't
know. Presumably it can be put to market. Maybe that should be, maybe that's, when you do a Kickstarter, don't you get something in value? So if you put in, I'm going to give $100. I want a barrel of oil.
Yep. You get a little souvenir jar in remembrance of your generosity of that oil.
I want something I can turn a profit on.
What would happen with the oil when they took it out? Would they then get it? I guess they'd probably get it to market if it's still good. But
it's Yemeni property, so presumably they would take it. But again, what's the recognized government of Yemen is no longer on seat. So there you go. There's another international question for you. Whose property is it? Mm-hmm. And do the Houthis have a right to it? And if there are revenues from it, are they put into escrow for whenever a duly elected and legitimate government is put in place in Yemen? So why did you go off down that wormhole?
Okay. It'll be a great weekend after that.
Exactly.
I think it's also interesting. I mean, to me, just like looking back at this, and we've been following this a little bit, Richard, the $80 million for the whole international community to come up with. I know $80 million is a lot of money to you or me, but that's not that much money to avoid a potentially expensive catastrophe. And it's not just the cost of the catastrophe, it's the environmental impact, which would just be such bad PR for everyone involved. And so I just, it seems like they should, I'm rooting for them to get this thing dealt with, because it would really suck if they just let it go down, didn't raise the minimal amount of money to get it taken care of, and then it just starts leaking oil everywhere.
I get the impression it's headed in the right direction. People are motivated.
Mashallah.
Mashallah. Was that you or me?
This is number
5.
This is you.
Saudi Arabia has closed its registration for domestic pilgrims who wish to perform Hajj. The more than 390,000 applicants will now wait on the results of a lottery to learn if they have been selected. Hajj authorities opened registrations for domestic pilgrims this month as the kingdom lifted restrictions on participation that were imposed in the past 2 years in response to the coronavirus pandemic.
Priority will be given to candidates who have been fully vaccinated against the coronavirus and have not performed the Hajj before, which is cool. Richard, the Hajj has really, it was shut down in the face of the coronavirus. It's almost fully back. 2020, they had 1,000 pilgrims take part. And then last year they had 60,000 fully vaccinated Saudi citizens and residents. They're looking to have up to 1 million foreign pilgrims come this year in addition to this. So it's back.
Yeah, exciting. And that's, I think it was good to include it because it's the reality right now. This is Hajj season. 2 months after Ramadan. So it's nice to see it back, nice to see it thriving, nice to see it oversubscribed, which it is. Mm-hmm. And just another good report in a great Saudi first quarter.
Quite the Saudi first quarter. Richard, this is cool too, because the Hajj is, it is big business for Saudi Arabia, but it's an even bigger responsibility for them to do it right and to keep people safe, to logistically get this number, the largest annual human migration on the planet, to get this right every year is expensive for them to operate and very difficult, and also a very important thing for them to do. I mean, King Salman is not King Salman. He's custodian of the two holy mosques, Salman. So it's just great to see this. It's also great to be kind of back in general. The pandemic was difficult on everybody listening to this podcast, and you and I. So it's you and me, I should say. So it's good to see little things like that. The normalcy of life creeping back into our lives again. So
I think you're spot on, and I agree. But it is also in keeping with the particularly good economic role Saudi Arabia is in, in addition to the commodity super cycle, in addition to private sector and coming out of the COVID strongly. Now they're getting revenues from the Hajj again. So from Umrah and Hajj. So it's another, again, they're in a really good spot right now. They're in the zone. Prices will come down and other things will happen. But right now, Saudi Arabia is really hitting on all cylinders.
Yeah. Also, a new Jeddah airport is in operation, so that will help a lot, which is good. The last one was not good. The new one looks awesome, so that should make it a little bit easier. But good for them, and very interesting. All right, number 6, Richard. According to an image leaked on Saturday, Lucid Motors is getting ready to open a new showroom in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia's capital and main financial hub. The company has currently 19 studios in the US and 2 in Canada and 1 in Germany, but this would be the first in Riyadh. The US-based company plans to establish operations at AMP2 initially for reassembly of Lucid Air vehicle kits that are pre-manufactured at the company's US AMP1 facility in Arizona, and over time for production of complete vehicles. The new Saudi factory is expected to address growing global demand for Lucid electric vehicles by increasing Lucid's global production capacity mid-decade to 500,000 EVs per year, the company recently said.
It's interesting. We've talked about this before, so it's all good, and it's great, especially if it leads to an actual, a significant automotive sector, which it probably will. But this. The returns on this and the investment and the production value of this is not incidental. I guess the company right now expects to produce between 12,000 and 4,000 vehicles this year, but their goal is to produce 350,000 units a year in the U.S. Once this is up and running, this is another 155,000. But I mean the Lucid plant in Saudi Arabia. It's another 155,000 units annually. And obviously, as you said, initially it's kits, but eventually it's going to be full manufacture. So hopefully by 2030. But as Peter Rawlinson said, quote, that means we can accelerate plans to produce 500,000 cars a year from what was going to be 2030 to mid-decade, unquote. That's what Rawlinson said about this production plan. So this isn't a goodwill gesture. This is a business decision, and to expand their manufacturing capability and reach the targets even sooner, reach production targets even sooner than initially expected.
What's cool about this story to me too, Richard, is that Saudis are patriotic about their support for anything that really that would help Vision 2030. And that's sort of a hard thing for us to understand as Americans, because we're, rooting for the success of America as an economy, but we're not doing it through some other channel. We're just saying, well, we want a good economy. But in Saudi Arabia, Saudis know that a successful Lucid car and having Lucids everywhere is actually good for the country. And so it's, through social media and just Instagram, different channels where I follow a lot of Saudis. Some are popular Saudis. Some are showing off their Lucids that they've imported early from the United States. And those first of all, they look so freaking rad. They look so cool. And we're expecting delivery of our Lucid at any point, Richard, as you noticed. But it's just like really interesting because, there's this one quote. I can't remember if it's in this article or a different one, but the quote is essentially, if everything goes to plan, in 6 to 7 years, you will see Lucids really everywhere around Saudi Arabia, and people will be excited to buy and to drive them as sort of a token on an investment in the future of the kingdom. And I know sounds like a bit of a stretch, but there is like a pride in Lucid from Saudis because they know what it means to Saudi Arabia if it's successful.
Yeah, it was a coup to get it. Obviously, it was insightful for PIF to invest in it. So, if it ends up creating jobs and setting up a whole, ecosystem in terms of automotive on top of making Saudis proud, it's a win-win-win. Mm-hmm. And I just want to make clear that I'm not particularly concerned about the color of the Lucid that I get. I don't know. So, whatever arrives on my doorstep in terms of a Lucid, I'll be delighted with it.
See, I want white because I don't have a water bill here. I'm on a well, so I can just hose that thing down every day. It'll look so crisp. I think white's a good color, a little tint in the windows. I don't really care about a lot of the other bells and whistles. But yeah, I hope you also choose a color that is not white so we can, compare, park them side by side.
Oh my goodness. My truck is white. So, and it's a problem because I don't have a garage. So, whatever it comes. But again, I'll be okay with whatever color.
They look so cool. I believe it was Wired that said it was the future of cars. So there's no smoke there. It just actually looks really awesome. We hope they start rolling it out. You have not seen a Lucid in the wild yet. I don't think I have either.
I haven't.
Yeah, I would expect you to send a photo to me though when you do see one. So
absolutely, if I could get it. I mean, if I could hear it coming or was fast enough to get it as it went by.
Richard, awesome episode. Thank you very much. We will be back next week. And don't forget to subscribe to this wherever you're getting it. We really appreciate everybody that is commenting and sending us emails, getting in touch with us. We do read all the feedback we get. We love hearing it. Recommendations for guests to come. We love all that stuff. We love to see it. We just ask that you are civil in the comment section, especially on YouTube. We are already doing 2 jobs here instead of 1. We don't need a 3rd job of moderating mean comments. So just please be respectful of others. But thank you very much. And Richard, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Lucien. Well done once again.
Good one. Thanks.